Hi, this is Eric Bjornstad with the Bell Performance video blog, and today we want to talk about something that happened back in March when we heard about the death of one Roy Brown Jr. Now, if you grew up in the first part of the 20th century, you might, and if you are a car enthusiast, you might recognize the name Roy Brown Jr. He was the designer that worked for the Ford Motor Company who designed the Edsel. Now, the Edsel, for better or for worse, has become synonymous with failure, unfortunately, in American popular culture history. But as time goes on, as with many things, what used to be considered a failure now seems to have a great deal of value, and that certainly has been true of the Edsel. Now, Roy Brown Jr. didn't just happen to stumble upon this opportunity. He had been employed by Ford as a car designer for many, many years before Ford put him to work in charge of a new project in the mid-50s. They wanted to design a car that was distinctive. It was unique. You could take one look at the car and you would know that was a Ford, and that was whatever model it would end up with. So they wanted it to be distinctive. They wanted it to be less expensive than other cars it was competing against in the marketplace, but they also at the same time wanted it to be higher end than the existing models that they were churning out. So they wanted to be less expensive but fancier. So Roy Brown came up with the resulting design, and they called it the Edsel. Now, as soon as the Edsel came out, the critics hated the car. Now, if you were alive back then, you're probably well familiar with the, shall we say, the design quirks that caused them to have such opinions. The big problem from Ford's point of view was that when they brought out the Edsel, when they introduced it to the marketplace, they were really expecting it to be a smash hit. And of course they were. They're not going to introduce a product that they know is going to be a failure. Well, unfortunately, they had bad consumer research. Their consumer research actually was, shall we say, somewhat outdated. The consumer tastes in the late 50s, when they brought out the Edsel, consumer tastes were shifting. Unfortunately, Ford's research did not reflect this, and so when they brought out the Edsel, consumers really didn't like it because their tastes were changing, and it became a gigantic flop that caused Ford to have to stop manufacturing it by around 1960. Now, you would think that a guy who had such a huge, colossal, memorable failure attached to his name, you might think that might get him down a little bit. But apparently Roy Brown Jr. just shook the dust off his feet, or to mix our metaphors, he got up and he dusted himself off, and he continued working. And he kept on being employed as a car designer for about 15 more years. Now, if you happen to grow up or live in Great Britain in the 70s, you will likely recognize the Ford Cortina. Ford Cortina was designed by Roy Brown Jr., and that actually happened to be the biggest selling car for Great Britain for the entire decade of the 1970s. So Roy Brown Jr. didn't let the Edsel get him down. He ended up having some pretty colossal successes to counter that memorable defeat. And even up through his death, like we said in March of 2013, he remained pretty passionate about the car that he had designed. He was still pretty enthusiastic about his work, and apparently the other car enthusiasts pretty much agree with Roy Brown, because the Edsel is now a pretty big collector's item. If you had a mint condition Edsel, you could probably sell that for right now for about $100,000. Yes. So, what is the moral of the story? Well, there's a number of morals, but I think that one big one is that you can recover very well, even if the defeat that you suffer may seem at the time to be insurmountable. Roy Brown Jr. certainly proved that point. So thanks for joining me today for the Bell video blog. If you'd like more information about this or any other topics related to cars, trucks, or fuels, go to one of our two websites, bellperformance.com and wefixfuel.com. So thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.